Welcome back to Fusty Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. William Clark had everything that made him look like a respectable man in society. A decent job, wealthy connections, and a beautiful house in London. Yet behind the walls of that home was a woman whose life was reduced to pain and humiliation. Emma Harris, his wife, was never the woman he desired. She was not the glamorous type William dreamed of, nor the flashy kind that caught the eyes of his friends. She was quiet, loyal, hardworking, and devoted. His late mother, Margaret Clark, had adored Emma when she worked as her caregiver and helper. On her deathbed, Margaret begged her son to marry Emma, claiming she was a gem who would keep the family together. Out of duty, William agreed, but from the very first day, resentment grew in his heart. He mocked her, belittled her, and reduced her role to that of a servant. His friends heard him refer to her as the cow-called wife, a cruel nickname that bruised Emma's soul, but which she endured for sake of peace. Emma had no family of her own to lean on. William knew this, which made her situation worse. She was heavily pregnant, carrying a child who was supposed to bring joy into her life, but instead, her days were filled with commands, chores, and endless ridicule. William's mistress, Sophie Turner, was the only woman he truly showered with attention. Sophie had style, beauty, and cunning charm, and William flaunted her like a trophy. But Emma, though broken in spirit, carried an inner strength she hadn't discovered yet. Fate was weaving her story silently, waiting for the perfect moment to break her chains. William's obsession with Sophie Turner blinded him completely. Sophie, with her blonde hair and sharp wit, knew exactly how to manipulate him. She painted herself as a woman who understood him better than anyone else, often mocking Emma behind her back during their secret dinners. William enjoyed these conversations, thinking Sophie was his soulmate, not knowing she was only after his wealth and status. While William spent lavishly on Sophie, buying her expensive jewelry and financing her exotic trips, Emma wore the same simple maternity dresses and counted pennies just to keep the house stocked with food. The contrast was stark, but William never cared. He thought of Emma as his burden and Sophie as his salvation. Emma, however, endured in silence. She cooked, cleaned, and fulfilled her duties, all while Sophie occasionally paraded herself in William's car, smirking as she passed by Emma. The humiliation cut deeper each day, but Emma held on, reminding herself of Margaret's last words. "You are stronger than you know. One day, the world will see it." William, preparing to host an important dinner party for his wealthy friends, announced to Sophie that Emma would prepare the feast. He laughed as he bragged to his circle that his cow-called wife would handle everything. What William didn't realize was that Emma, in her fragile state of pregnancy, was already struggling to stand for long hours. Her body was weary, and her heart was heavier than ever. That dinner party would mark the turning point of everything, an event that would strip William of his pride and expose the cracks in the false life he had built. Emma struggled through the final weeks of her pregnancy. Her back ached constantly, her feet were swollen, and even breathing felt like a task. Yet William continued to pile chores on her, without a shred of compassion. He barked orders before leaving for work, expecting the house to be spotless, his shirts ironed, and a 3-course meal ready when he returned. Emma tried to explain her condition, how she could barely bend or lift pots, but William shut her down with a sharp glare and cruel words. "Don't give me excuses, Emma," he sneered. "A real wife doesn't complain. A cow should know how to serve." His words sliced into her heart, each one reminding her of the chains she wore in her marriage. That evening, Emma sat alone in the kitchen, rubbing her belly and whispering to her unborn child. "One day, you will know love. One day, you will know kindness." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Deep inside, she knew she couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. Still, she pushed on, determined to obey William's command to prepare the grand dinner for his friends. But as the day approached, her strength faltered. The baby kicked more aggressively, and sharp pains shot through her body. Emma realized she might not have the strength to pull it off, yet she feared the wrath of her husband more than the agony in her body. On the morning of the dinner party, Emma tried her best. She dragged herself from bed, made lists, and even attempted to start preparing dishes. But her body betrayed her. The pregnancy pains grew unbearable, forcing her to sit down every few minutes. Sweat poured down her forehead, and her legs trembled under the weight of her body. Finally, she leaned against the counter and whispered, "I can't do this." Fear washed over her. Fear of William's anger. Fear of the humiliation she would face. Gathering her courage, she called him before he left the office. "William," she said weakly, "I can't cook for tonight. I'm in too much pain. Please find another way." Instead of understanding, William exploded. "Are you stupid, Emma? Do you want me to look like a fool in front of my friends? You had one job. One. Don't start with your lazy excuses. You will cook tonight, even if you crawl to do it." He slammed the phone down, leaving Emma in tears. When evening came, William arrived with his guests, his confidence high as he bragged about the feast his wife had prepared. But as he entered the dining room, his smile froze. The table was empty. No food, no wine, no dishes set. His friends exchanged awkward glances. Rage boiled inside William as he stormed into the kitchen to find Emma sitting on a chair, clutching her belly in pain. Without hesitation, he slapped her across the face, his voice booming, "You've embarrassed me, cow." The slap echoed through the room, silencing even the laughter of his friends. Emma staggered, her cheek burning red, but it was her heart that hurt the most. William's guests stood frozen, shocked by the display of cruelty. One of them, a tall, commanding man named Richard Adams, stepped forward, his jaw clenched tightly. Richard was a respected CEO, known for his integrity and influence. He had been invited to dinner to discuss business, but what he witnessed shook him. "Enough, William," Richard said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "She's your wife, not your servant. You've crossed a line." William sneered, brushing him off. "Stay out of my family matters. This is between me and my wife." He turned back to Emma, pointing toward the door. "Get out. You're useless. You've ruined everything." Emma's heart pounded as she realized he meant it. He wanted her gone. With tears streaming down her face, she staggered out of the house, clutching her belly and whispering prayers for strength. Richard, disgusted by William's arrogance, excused himself from the party and followed Emma outside. He found her trembling on the pavement, trying to catch her breath. "You don't have to go through this alone," Richard said softly, offering his hand. Emma looked at him, unsure whether to trust a stranger, but something in his eyes, a quiet kindness, made her believe. Richard drove Emma to his home, a warm, spacious house far from the coldness of William's. He called a doctor immediately, ensuring Emma and the baby were safe. As she lay on the couch, sipping warm tea, Emma couldn't stop crying, not just from pain, but from the realization that someone actually cared. Richard sat across from her, his eyes steady. "No woman deserves to be treated like that," he said, "especially not when she's carrying life inside her." Emma lowered her gaze, ashamed of her brokenness. "I've been nothing more than a servant," she whispered. "He calls me his cow. He never loved me." Richard's heart tightened. He had seen ruthless men in business, but William's cruelty was beyond comprehension. "Emma, you are worth more than you know. One day you'll see that." His words felt like balm to her wounds. Over the next few days, Richard arranged for legal counsel and encouraged Emma to file for divorce. Though scared, she found courage in his support. She signed the papers, ending her toxic marriage. William, upon receiving the notice, mocked her loudly to anyone who would listen, swearing she would suffer and come crawling back. But little did he know, Emma had already begun a new chapter, one filled with dignity, hope, and the promise of love she had never experienced before. News of the divorce spread quickly among William's circle. He laughed at the idea of Emma leaving him, telling his friends she would soon regret it. "She'll suffer without me. She has no money, no family, nothing. Let her crawl back when the hunger bites." His mistress, Sophie Turner, cheered him on, stroking his ego while secretly planning her next move. She assured him, "You've done the right thing, darling. That cow is dragging you down. Now we can live freely." William believed her, pouring even more of his wealth into Sophie's hands. Together, they traveled, dined, and enjoyed luxuries, while Emma quietly healed under Richard's roof. But cracks began to show. William started receiving strange calls from banks about unusual withdrawals. Sophie always had an explanation, charming him into believing everything was fine. Meanwhile, his business began losing key partners, including Richard Adams, who cut ties after witnessing William's cruelty. William shrugged it off, confident his wealth would never run dry. At night, however, doubts crept into his mind. He would think of Emma, her loyalty, her sacrifices, her silent strength. Yet instead of remorse, he mocked her memory, convinced she was somewhere begging for scraps. In reality, Emma was surrounded by care she never knew existed, and her life was blossoming in ways William could never imagine. Emma settled into Richard Holmes slowly, hesitant at first, but soon finding comfort in his kindness. Richard never treated her like a burden. He hired help to ensure she didn't overwork herself and checked in on her every day. Over dinners, he would ask about her dreams, her past, and the things she had never been allowed to share with William. For the first time in years, Emma laughed genuinely, her laughter filling Richard home like sunshine. She realized how starved she had been for simple kindness. Their bond deepened with each passing week. Richard admired her resilience, how she had endured so much yet still carried warmth in her heart. Emma admired his gentleness, a quality she had never seen in men around her. Slowly, she began to believe that life could be different, that love didn't have to hurt. As her due date approached, Richard stood firmly by her side, promising to be there when the baby arrived. Emma found herself falling for him, though she tried to guard her heart. After all, her wounds were still fresh. But every glance, every word, and every gesture from Richard made it clear her future might hold more love than she ever thought possible. While Emma's life turned brighter, William's world began to crumble. Sophie, ever cunning, started draining his accounts more aggressively. She convinced him to sign documents he barely read, assuring him they were for investments. In reality, she was transferring his wealth to offshore accounts, preparing her grand escape. William, blinded by lust and arrogance, ignored the warning signs. He bought her more jewelry, financed her parties, and even promised her a stake in his company. Sophie smiled, but behind that smile was a scheme that would leave him ruined. One evening, Sophie disappeared. William came home to find her clothes gone, her phone switched off, and his safe empty. Panic gripped him as he rushed to the bank, only to discover that nearly all his accounts had been drained. The truth hit him like a storm. He had been conned. His angel was nothing but a thief. Desperation clawed at his chest. He thought of Emma, how loyal she had been, how she never asked for a penny for herself. Regret slithered into his mind, but it was too late. Emma had already built a new world, one where William had no place. Emma's labor came suddenly in the middle of the night. Richard rushed her to the hospital, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement. Hours later, the cries of a newborn filled the room. Emma cradled her son, Oliver, tears streaming down her face as she kissed his tiny forehead. "You're my miracle," she whispered. Richard, standing beside her, felt his heart swell with emotions he hadn't known before. He looked at Emma and the baby with a silent vow. He would protect them both, no matter what. As Emma recovered, Richard proposed something unexpected. "Emma," he said gently, "I know you've been through pain, but I want to give you the love and life you deserve. Not just for you, but for Oliver too. Marry me when you're ready." Emma was speechless. Her heart was full, torn between fear and joy. She had left a life of cruelty behind, and now she stood at the doorway of a future filled with hope. William, meanwhile, was penniless, wandering the streets, seeking forgiveness he no longer deserved. Fate had turned, and for the first time, Emma saw herself not as a cow, not as a burden, but as a woman finally free to live and love. William's fall from grace was swift and merciless. Once a proud man who flaunted his wealth and power, he was now a broken shadow of himself. His accounts were empty, his house repossessed, and his so-called friends vanished the moment the money dried up. Sophie had left him nothing but shame. He wandered the streets of London, wearing the same wrinkled suit, begging for help from anyone who recognized him. Most turned away, whispering about his downfall. Others laughed, remembering how he once mocked his wife and paraded his mistress. Now he was nothing. One cold evening, William stood outside Richard's mansion, shivering as rain soaked through his clothes. He saw Emma through the window, holding baby Oliver in her arms while Richard gently placed a blanket around her shoulders. The sight pierced his heart. That should have been him, he thought bitterly. Gathering courage, he rang the bell. When Emma opened the door, shock filled her eyes. William looked desperate, his once proud eyes hollow. "Emma," he whispered, voice trembling, "I made a mistake. Please, take me back. I have nothing. I need you." Emma's grip tightened on the doorframe, her mind racing between the pain of her past and the peace she now lived in. Emma stared at William for a long moment, her heart heavy with memories of the pain he caused. Images of his mockery, the slap across her face, and the cruel name cow flooded back. She felt Oliver stir in her arms, reminding her of the life she was protecting. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "William, you taught me what love is not. You broke me, humiliated me, and discarded me when I needed you most. You don't deserve to be in my life, and you don't deserve to know Oliver." Her words cut deeper than any slap, and William staggered back as if struck. Richard appeared at the door, his presence strong and protective. "You need to leave," he told William. "Emma owes you nothing. You had your chance." William's lips trembled as he tried to speak, but the door closed before he could form the words. Alone in the rain, he collapsed to his knees, realizing that the one person who could have saved him was gone forever. Inside, Emma leaned against the wall, tears streaming down her face, not of regret, but of release. For the first time, she felt the chains of her past truly break. William no longer had power over her. Life with Richard became a journey of healing for Emma. She learned to smile again, to trust again, and to dream again. Richard never rushed her. He understood her scars ran deep. Together, they cared for Oliver, their days filled with laughter and small, beautiful moments that Emma once thought were impossible. Richard's family welcomed her warmly, treating her with respect that felt foreign yet comforting. For the first time, she wasn't seen as a servant or a burden. She was seen as a woman of worth. Emma began to rediscover her passions. She loved baking and decided to take a small step toward independence by starting a home-based bakery. Richard supported her fully, helping her set up deliveries and encouraging her to grow. Slowly, Emma's cakes became known in their community, and her confidence blossomed with every order. She realized that strength wasn't just about surviving pain. It was about building something new despite it. In quiet moments, as she watched Oliver sleep, Emma whispered, "You'll never know the pain I did. I promise." Richard would often overhear and smile, knowing she meant every word. Despite her new life, the whispers of the past occasionally returned. One afternoon, while delivering cakes, Emma ran into an old acquaintance of William's who sneered. "So, you've moved on quickly, haven't you?" The comment stung, but Emma lifted her head high and replied, "I've moved on to happiness. That's something William never gave me." The woman had no response. Emma walked away, realizing that the opinions of others no longer held her captive. Meanwhile, William spiraled further into despair. He had taken to drinking heavily, sleeping in shelters, and begging on streets where once he drove his luxury car. People avoided him, disgusted by his stench and pitiful state. He often muttered Emma's name, clinging to the delusion that she would forgive him one day. But each night, as he lay on cold pavement, he was haunted by the vision of her smiling in another man's arms. His downfall wasn't just financial. It was the death of his pride, his ego, and his false sense of power. One evening, as the golden glow of sunset filled the Adams garden, Richard took Emma by the hand. "Emma," he began softly, "I've watched you grow stronger every day. You're not just Oliver's mother. You're the woman who's captured my heart completely. Will you marry me?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had been waiting for this moment, yet fearing it too. The idea of love had once felt like a trap, but with Richard, it felt like freedom. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes, Richard. Yes, I will." He slipped a ring onto her finger, and Oliver, resting in her arms, gurgled happily as if blessing the union. The night was filled with laughter, champagne, and promises of a new life. Emma felt like she was finally stepping into the destiny Margaret had seen in her. The woman once mocked as a cow was now cherished as a queen in the eyes of the man who truly loved her. Emma's wedding day was unlike anything she had ever dreamed. It was simple, elegant, and filled with genuine love. She wore a flowing ivory gown, her hair adorned with delicate flowers, and carried Oliver down the aisle as Richard waited at the altar with tears in his eyes. Friends, family, and well-wishers filled the church, but Emma hardly noticed them. Her gaze was locked on Richard, the man who had given her back her life. As vows were exchanged, Emma felt a warmth fill her soul. She was no longer defined by William's cruelty or Sophie's schemes. She was Emma Adams now, wife to a man who honored her, and mother to a son who would grow up surrounded by love. When Richard kissed her, the applause echoed like thunder, sealing the moment. Emma glanced upward, silently thanking Margaret Clark. who had once believed in her worth. Somewhere beyond, Emma knew Margaret's spirit smiled. Months passed, and Emma flourished in her new role as both wife and entrepreneur. Her bakery expanded into a small shop, attracting customers who adored her recipes and her kindness. She became a beacon of inspiration, her story whispered among women who had suffered in silence. If Emma can rise, so can we, many said. Emma never flaunted her success, but carried it with humility, grateful for every blessing. Oliver grew fast, his laughter filling their home with joy. Richard was a doting father, and Emma often marveled at how different her life had become. The woman once mocked and humiliated now stood tall, respected and loved. Her journey had not been easy, but it had shaped her into a woman of resilience and grace. She often thought of William, but only as a reminder of how far she had come. He no longer had power over her thoughts, her heart, or her future. William, now gone and hollow-eyed, appeared one day at Emma's bakery. His clothes were torn, his beard unkempt, and his voice cracked with desperation. Customers gasped as they recognized the once powerful man who now looked like a beggar. "Emma," he pleaded, falling to his knees, "please, forgive me. I have nothing left. Sophie ruined me. You were the only good thing in my life. I'll do anything, just take me back." His voice broke as he sobbed, clutching her dress. Emma froze, her heart pounding. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the shop on her. For a moment, she saw the man who had once controlled her life, the man she had feared. But then she looked at Oliver's picture on the wall, at Richard waiting outside in the car, and she realized she was no longer the woman he could manipulate. "William," she said calmly, "I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean I'll let you back into my life. You made your choices, and I've made mine. I am free now. Please leave." William's sobs filled the room, but Emma turned her back, choosing her future over her past. Not long after, Sophie was arrested in Spain for fraud. Her schemes had finally caught up with her, and newspapers splashed her story across headlines. William read about it from his shelter, realizing the woman he had ruined his life for was nothing more than a thief. The irony was bitter, but he had no strength left to care. His name was mud, his reputation destroyed, and his wealth gone forever. Emma, on the other hand, was celebrated. Her bakery won awards, and her story of resilience was published in magazines. She became a voice for women who had endured abuse, using her platform to encourage others to break free from toxic relationships. Standing beside Richard, she spoke at charity events, her words powerful and filled with hope. "You are not cows, you are not burdens," she told women. "You are worthy of love, dignity, and respect." Her message resonated deeply, inspiring countless others to reclaim their lives. Years later, Emma watched Oliver run across the garden, his laughter ringing like music. Richard sat beside her, holding her hand as they enjoyed the peace of their home. Emma's bakery had grown into a chain, her story now known across the country. She had everything she once thought was impossible: love, respect, family, and freedom. The scars of her past remained, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they were reminders of the journey she had conquered. William, somewhere in the shadows of London, lived forgotten. His once lavish life was nothing but a memory, and the name William Clark carried no weight. Emma never thought of him with bitterness anymore. She had forgiven him, but she had built a world where he no longer mattered. Looking at Richard and Oliver, she smiled, her heart full. "This," she whispered, "is the life I was meant to live." From servant to mocked wife, to abandoned woman, Emma had risen into a queen of her own destiny. Her story was no longer one of pain, but of triumph. It was only the beginning. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.